Welcome everybody. This webinar is being hosted by Future Earth and Divecha Center. The keynote is titled Sustainable Communities Coping with Climate Change. So we'll have a brief introduction about both our speakers today. We have Mr. Satya Sai Kumar Jillella and we have Mr. Muthanna. So I'll talk a little bit about both of them. Mr. Satya Sai Kumar is known for his international expertise in policy, practice, research, education, and technologies with three decades of professional success. He was associated with a lot of prestigious institutions like the United Nations, SCAP, Infosys, IT, ISE, Indus University. Right now, he is the Pro Vice Chancellor of Srinivasa University at Mangalore. He did a lot of strategic leadership roles on a global platform, and he spearheaded a lot of innovative policy transformations across sustainability, transportation, logistic, and public sector domains. As a UN expert, he was privileged enough to impact a lot of public policy by actively promoting sustainable development practices for UN member countries in the Asia Pacific region. He holds a PhD from Australia. He has 2 master's degrees and a bachelor's in engineering. He's an alumnus of the Curtin University in Australia, Asian Institute of Technology, IIM Ahmedabad, Anna University, and JNTU Kakinada. His research interests include strategy transformation, design thinking, social innovation, smart sustainable cities, and urban mobility. So we have Mr. Satya Sai Kumar Jillella going first, and the next speaker that we have is Mr. Colonel C.P. Muthanna. He joined the Indian Army in December 1972, and he served for 24 years. He commanded an infantry battalion for 4 years. After taking voluntary retirement in 1996, he founded the Environment and Health Foundation in India in 1998. It's an NGO mainly working on water-related issues, including rainwater harvesting and protection of river catchment areas. On behalf of this organization, he has prepared a proposal for stabilization of climate change in the Himalayas and the Mekong Basin. In 2006, he was awarded the Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam Award for the work in the field of environment by the government of Karnataka. He is currently the vice chair of the Kodagu Model Forest Trust. He's also published a book which deals with the climate threats and challenges in India, which he was very kind enough to give to me, and I've had the privilege of reading it. So I will share the floor, and the first speaker can take the floor. Mr. Dr. Satya?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, yes. I can.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. Namaskar. Can you share the screen with me?
Yeah, sure. Okay. You can share it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you see this?
Yes. Yes.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. You can see it now, right? Wonderful. Okay. Thank you very much. Good morning to you all. And Mr. Muthanna, thank you, sir. It's a privilege to share this webinar in Dayas with you. And I heard a lot about the Kodagu region. Yeah. Namaskar. And Maitreyi, it's wonderful to have this session today, particularly the scope for the future Earth. We are looking at the sustainable communities coping with the climate change. And I would like to talk today, as per the given mandate, implementation of public policies in the field of sustainable road transportation management and safety. Typically, each of this, let it be a sustainable road transportation or a road transport management or a road transport safety, each of itself is a very wide scope, broad subjects actually, very deep drive driven. But Maitreyi has given me a kind of a puzzle now that do a miracle to finish this in 20 minutes. I will try to do that miracle right away.
Yeah, you can take half an hour. Yeah, both of you can take half an hour.
Right, no problem. We'll try to do that. And this is an interesting topic, particularly it is my passionate subject. When it comes to the sustainable communities development or the sustainable urban development, the sustainable road transportation plays a very significant role. because it has a lot of relevance when you really want to have a quality of living, because transportation is very vital, not only just for the moving from point A to point B, but it's very vital for the economic as well as for the social fabric of the community. So with this introduction, let me go on to the subject. So if you see across the UN SDGs, Sustainable Road Transportation and Management, where you have almost like out of the 17 UN SDGs, 10 goals are more or less have been directly or indirectly been have been depending or it can be influenced by the sustainable transport. So that means any effort, any improvement that we do as part of this one, we will be able to really can bring a lot of change and impact for the UN SDGs. Particularly, say for example, there are 6 SDG. When we talk about UN SDG goals, we will also have the targets as well as the indicators. At least 6 SDG targets directly related to the transport sector. Where is the, for example, addressing road safety, which can be as part of the good health, maybe the improvement of the health where the safety is also important, and also reduction in the accidents or the fatalities that also contribute a lot for the health sector, and at the same time reducing air pollution again, that is also can save a lot of lives, particularly getting into the unfortunate diseases because of the pollution. And energy efficiency is another important area where transportation actually is a culprit right now, but the futuristic transport has to transform itself as a more energy efficient way of doing things in the transport, which we will be covering in the next few slides. And sustainable infrastructure, of course, we need to have a very sustainable and self-sustained, self-financing. That is where we have to look for the road transportation and more into a road infrastructure, building the road transit, and this is where we can actually can have the more impact as well as more benefit of the sustainability in the road transportation sector we could have. And of course, providing access, if having a factory product developed somewhere, but it is manufactured, but if it is not reaching the market, it doesn't have a value. That is where transportation creates that time utility and the space utility, and bringing it to the market and the right targets. And of course, fossil fuel reduction by itself, that is also another important element, because so far we never may always we have ignored when it comes to the fossil fuel or reduction or the low carbon mobility. So far we have done a number of projects on the paper, or a kind of a number of studies have been done. Every city you must be knowing that at least having it 4 or 5 mobility plans, but at the same time when it's seen the reality or the implementation, we are facing a lot of issues, because the most of these plans remain in the paper itself, rather than getting into the action. So this is very important now, because it's very important today. We all need to get into the right fuel, right energy. So that's where we can actually can look for the sustainable living and having the future earth, the way that we actually focus that we have one planet, and we need to survive, we need to stabilize, we need to survive not only for ourselves as well as for the several species that are depending on this planet. So with this, I also would like to tell you that 1 minute. Today, the road transportation sector, particularly why it is more important for the sustainability, is because 64% of the global oil consumption is happening by road transportation sector. Another 2 more wars like what is happening today that cannot sustain, and the entire movement of the transport from point A to B, or the entire transportation sector will go for a collapse, because this is where we see 64% of the global oil consumption is happening for the in the road transportation sector. So it is much more than the industry usage particularly, and even the energy usage also. 27% of the global energy usage is particularly being consumed by transportation sector. And of course, we are also contributing greatly into the carbon dioxide emissions of many of the pollutants, particularly if you see that transportation sector is responsible for significant emissions of carbon dioxide or carbon monoxide or hydrocarbons, nitrogen oxide or sulfur dioxide and suspended particulate matter. The people from Bangalore, I need not have to, or from the Delhi, you are fully aware of that, what is the outcome or what is the impact of this today that is happening because of this pollution that is happening due to the transportation sector. And you also know that these pollutions, pollutants, whatever we have a very huge health impacts. So we can name it like diseases like bronchitis, even for children, asthmatic children. If you see them, bronchitis is a major cause of that, and reduced lung function is another major issue. There are a lot of respiratory issues, diseases, and lung cancer. So these are all actually contributing a lot due to the pollution. And today, even the WHO report highlights that air pollution is one of the top significant contributor for the untimely deaths. So this is very unfortunate. So this time has come now. We have to relook at the way we are actually operating it. And in addition to that, the productive life of the young population, productive population, and are they impacted by their families due to road accidents. Every WHO report and the World Bank report recently released, every minute we have two road accident deaths, which is really, really alarming because we are all see a lot of publicity when a Boeing with 180 passengers or 100 passengers, if it collapses, it will get a lot of publicity and a lot of attention of the policymakers as well as the community and the public at large. But when it comes to this, like we are having two deaths, two fatalities every minute, and also more than 50 injuries every minute. This is really an alarming status. So there is this need to change. Otherwise, this is going to be a major contributor when it comes to the immature deaths or the mortality rates. And you also know, as we discussed already, sustainable transport not only for the improvement of the transportation or the environment, but at the same time it can improve economic growth because the whole world is now focusing is onto the green economy or the next world economy is a green economy or a knowledge economy. This is where we can see the next drive or the next change that is happening in a big way. So this here sustainable transport can contribute a lot for the social equity and the accessibility, public health, urban resilience, urban rural linkages, so rural area productivity. Therefore, sustainable communities, if it is that is need to be triggered, we have to invest into the sustainable road transportation or the sustainable transportation for that matter. And governments also need to now we are in actually not in a stage when a decade back I used when I was in UN. I have to spend a lot of time in convincing the policymakers that sustainability itself is a very important element. We have to look at the policy as well as in the implementation of the projects. But now today we are living into a kind of a climate action era. So this is where government is already taken up. Many of the governments across the world are supported by taking the sustainable transport systems, including energy efficient multimodal transport systems and public improvement in the public mass transportation systems or the clean fuels and the vehicles. Actually, at least the awareness has been created, and some part of the world is already a little more advanced, but whereas some part of the world is initiating in a big way. So this itself contributes a lot when we talk about that how much of the importance when it comes to the sustainable development goals or the sustainable communities to mitigate the climate change or adapt to the climate change, the role that transportation has going to sustainable transportation is going to play. So here it is very important, but at the same time we have a lot of developments, a lot of new technologies are coming in, lot of new behavior, travel behaviors are upcoming because we have also seen post-COVID scenarios or the during COVID scenarios. The transportation sector is one sector has greatly impacted, and we have also seen the benefits are at the same time the issues faced during this
Sir,
time.
sorry to
Yeah,
interrupt.
yeah.
Your network is very finicky. Hello?
Ah, 1 minute.
Sir, your network is a little. You're getting cut, sir.
You mean my voice is getting cut?
Yeah, yeah, your voice is getting cut. Just.
Okay.
I think it's your internet. Just.
Can you hear me better? Hello? Hello?
Hello? Yes.
Yeah, can you hear me better now? Hello?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, good.
Okay. Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah.
So this is very important that we have to really rethink and implementing structural changes to transportation due to the developments that are happening, because the same old way of the concepts will not work anymore, because we have to reinvent, we have to implement with the, and also we have to, what worked elsewhere need not have to work in our situation. So one size cannot fit all. So this is where we have to see like a global, where we can see the best practices, but we have to customize and locally we have to implement. So that sustainable transportation planning is need to go for a rethinking, and a lot of structural changes to transportation may have to be that actually will give you a profound impact, positive impact on the emission levels, air quality, or the quality of living and the health achievements of the sustainability goals. So how it can be done, but today it is a global responsibility. It is not that only one country or the one region have to do this. And the entire focus is not for mobility of the vehicles, because that is what we did all these days. The number of vehicles have increased, the quantities have increased, then we went on building the roads or the number of lanes, or we are expanding the roads. But today, we have the realization already, and also even the decision makers are also with us when we are talking about mobility, is for not just to move the vehicles but to move the people. So this is where moving the people as well as the goods from one place to other, how efficiently you do it. So this is where the entire concept of sustainable road transportation, the new way of new thinking is in progress. And what it exactly means is how it need to be more equitable, when it need to be affordable as well as accessible to all the communities, all the stakeholders, and more efficient when it comes to the operational. It cannot be like what we had so far all these days. Like if you see the picture here, it's like even a flyover picture, that one, it became like an elevated parking lot rather than it actually, the very objective of providing flyovers is to maneuver the traffic congestion and have a free flow of the traffic. But here, even some of the flyovers, of course, people in Bangalore and metro cities, many metro cities have this kind of phenomena. This is more like a kind of a where you can see that they remained as the elevated parking lots I used to call. So efficiency is very important in the transport systems and the services, and it need to be safer, because we cannot afford to lose the productive lives and their families. And at the same time, it need to be greener, because this is where the entire shift of the transport infrastructure, for that matter, actually the whole world, the entire global economy is going into the decarbonization process. So it is no exception that transportation sector has anymore any exception. So we need to have a sustainable transportation. But when we say sustainable road transportation, it is also very important to understand, unless you have a zero emission target, because it is only works positive, and it is only possible with zero emission transport target. Unless otherwise any compromise we do here and there, then it will never be able to achieve the sustainable transportation. So that way decarbonization is the need of the hour, and zero emission target should be the focus across the countries and the cities. And if you see the trends already, we are lucky actually. We are talking this in the 2022, but not in the late 90s or the early 2000, because that time we are still have to make the people understand about the impact or the issues which are highlighting and making that very important, that people should understand where they have to invest and all that. But today, I'm happy to report that many developments are happening towards the sustainable transport across the globe, but of course at a different speed and different scale of or different level of initiatives are happening. But if you look at the typically the focus of the transportation today, the pyramid has been reversed. If you see on the left side of the screen, where pedestrians are becoming the key focus today, because this is very important, that we should actually the entire space belongs to them, pedestrians, and then the priority goes to the cyclists, then the priority go to the transit, then the commercial vehicles, and then the single occupancy vehicles or the private ownership vehicles. Because this part we have to, if you delete this private single occupancy vehicles, if you can attract these trips as much as possible to the other priority modes, actually then we can achieve our goals much faster. So entire world is looking towards that, how we can actually can attract the private transport and ensure and enable the mode shift. So which is a big challenge today. When it comes to the Asian cities, we are already investing heavily in the developing quality public transport and public transit particularly. We have seen the metros are coming in, we have seen the BRTs coming in, and we have also seen kickstarted the e-mobility initiatives. When it comes to the Europe, because they are a bit advanced on these activities, and they are now investing heavily into walking and cycling, and making transport friendly, differently abled people. That's where, and also adopting micro mobility and the shared mobility. Because today mobility we are calling it as a shared service. So mobility, the micro mobility and the shared mobility options are been very thoroughly implemented in European cities, and e-mobility or the R&D into the very automation particularly is actually taking a big way, and very I could say an exciting work is happening in European cities. Maybe I can show in the next few slides about that. Even of course in USA and other developed countries, also developed regions, we have also seen a similar initiatives, and also self-driving cars or the automation is taking a big shape, and there is a big hype around that, and shared new model options, which is really very disruptive actually when it comes to the things which we cannot see today. Maybe a decade back, if I talk about having booking your cab, then we have to look for the travel agent right across the road, or a person who is having the number of cars with him to operate a taxi. You have to buy a car. But today, Uber has changed the entire game. So this is where the game-changing disruptive initiatives are unveiling that may actually change the entire behavior as well. So e-mobility is of course going to take place in a big way. But and also it's a very important aspect you can see here, that the travel behaviors are changing. If you see the millennial community today, the way they want to go on to because they are so much so with a lot of information they are so much agile with the mobility and the mobile phones, and they don't want to drive. That is where that is a very, and they want to go into the public transit as a passenger. This is where actually this travel behavior change, it brings a very positive when it comes to the transport issues to be solved, and to encourage more into the public transport. But here one thing is very, very important, that is that we have to create a speed, and when we are talking about public transport, when we have to make it affordable, and we have to make it not only the speed, also the comfort and capacity. So we have to look at all these four parameters when we are actually seeing to improve the public transit. And also we have to cutting the emissions, that should be the focus, and cutting journey times, or cutting expenses. So these are all going to move and attract as many young generation as possible. This is a very positive change, and there are very big ideas which I said many of the developed countries in a pilot stage they are there. Anytime they can be unveiled into the commercialization. So I want to give you a glimpse of some of them. Maybe some of you might have heard about Hyperloop. This is actually works a combination of maglev theory at the same time without air going into the tube, but the speed is phenomenal. The speed is phenomenal. So that is where it makes a big more than even into the going into the airways. It matches it could be more than airways. So that is where on a road transport or a transport of like a hyperloop transport really can change the game of life, that you can stay in the Washington, but you can actually go to the Los Angeles very seamlessly in a given time, and have a meeting and come back. These are all possible things having that kind of transit when it gets come to the reality. And also there is another very interesting innovation, we call it as robo taxis, and it's very soon these things are going to come in the next few years or in a decade. You can see the entire game of travel is changing. Particularly here by 2025, the robo taxis are expected to take off, and 80% of the people are going to use them. when it is available. This is the estimation. This is what the people have given. So this is going to make a big change or the impact the way the transportation is going to happen. So when we are actually talking about sustainable urban transport plans, so we have to not only see it what happened in the past, what is happening in the land use, but we should keep in mind that because unless Uber has to come into the India, we never knew that there will be something, a change that you can book your travel on a mobile phone. So these things are going to come because today we are living in a global world. So everything can happen and these things can enter into the markets of India or the South Asia. Also will not take much time actually. But the moment it is becoming successful pilot here. And even by 2030 in US, it is expected that one-fourth of the passenger miles are expected to be the shared services. And also we having a drone kind of transportation which is very popular today across the world. So many of the freight transportation needs like high priority goods or the on-demand goods or the fresh food or medical supplies or the electronics, these are all will be supplied through drone-based freight transportation systems. So that means you are seeing less vehicles on the road. So and also there is another interesting innovation happening in Germany. This is where what we call it as a volocopter. This volocopter actually what you are seeing is again on a drone based principles having like a helicopter structure inside. So where you can actually you can order this similar to like a Uber taxi. You can actually use your mobile phone. You can actually book this volocopter, and it will come and it will land in the place designated locations. You can go there, and you can actually can use just like a Uber what you are doing, and even you can have a perspective view of the city as well. And all these things are targeting today the reducing the number of cars on the city street by 60%, which is today if I say to somebody that yes, in Bangalore we can reduce the car movement from 60%, people will laugh at me. But having these kind of developments, having these kind of the innovations, the disruptive innovations that are coming, this is not going to be a challenge, but it's going to be a reality. So, and also we expect that emissions will be cut by 80%. And road accident cut by 90% is definitely is going to happen in a big way in the Western world to start with, but it won't take like those days that if they do it something and the innovation and other things come to the this part of the world or like South Asia and other places like a decade later or 2 decades later. But today we are living in a connected world, so it may not take much time. We may be also be seeing a similar kind of developments here. So when we are preparing for our policies, public transport policies or the sustainable transport policies, we need to look at this new normal way of looking the developments that are going to happen. And if you see, therefore, I would like to call the transportation is not anymore like the old passion of doing things, and but it is a new normal. Post COVID has clearly given a new normal for the transport, and because now everybody is including pedestrians and cycling as part of the city commuting, which has been which has been really been considered and which has been really been understood today. And post-COVID era, that is the new normal is unveiled, and pedestrian cycling, non-motorized transport are getting a lot of priority today, and both in the planning as well as in the implementation. And it is a call taken by all the government. Coal and gas dependency needs to be stopped. By when is the only question. Maybe we will be doing little late, and other people may be doing little faster. But this is an important element in your planning when you are actually looking at it. Move people, not the vehicles, and also fast charging e-mobilities with renewable sources. Because many people say we have to convert into electrical mobility. Yes, electrical mobility is but electrical mobility of the passenger cars, if you are transferring, it will only reduce the air pollution, but not the congestion, because you are not reducing the number of vehicles on the road. And at the same time, having electrical mobility itself will not reduce emissions in a big way, because unless you source the electricity from the renewable energy sources. Otherwise, again, coal and gas kind of an electricity if you are using here, you are actually doubling the problem rather than solving the problem. So that way, the public transport getting into e-mobility is much more preferred than with the e-mobility, than more into the kind of e-mobility with the renewable sources or the clean fuels. That is more important when it comes to the private transport. And making car usage that is as a luxury. It's because this is also very important because today we are all our policies are very much vehicle friendly and the car friendly. But this has to change, and car usage like Singapore can be a best example. You can buy a car, but you cannot use car that yeah, because it's a big luxury and an expensive thing. So reducing emissions focus or the adaptation mechanisms have to be looked into. Innovations with speed, capacity, and comfort, green technologies, green highways in making. These are very important now. Even although we announce here, when this part of the world, they always say that we are going with the green highways or the like for example in Singapore, they have a land transport authority which takes care of the entire transportation issues, road transportation issues. But they also takes care of traffic police also been under the influence of land transport authority and reports to land transport authority. Even the railways reports to the local urban rail, commuter rail reports to the transport authority. Traffic police reports to the transport authority. Even the taxis will fall into that land transport authority. But similar thing we have taken in Karnataka as the first state, calling it as a Directorate of Urban Land Transport. But we have only taken the name of Singapore Land Transport Authority, but we made Directorate of Urban Land Transport as a coordinating agency. But unless you give it's only a policy making agency without a empowered agency to implement, then things will not happen because we have a disparate agencies need to be coordinated, and everyone have their own priorities, their own budgets, or their own financial allocations on the priorities. So shared bikes, safe walkways, transit, and transit to walkable economies, because it's a transit-oriented development. Many of you might have heard about this. We are now talking about walkable economies. So this is where we can actually can limit the need of going on longer trips. And many of you in metro cities must be knowing that you must be traveling at least spending on commuting minimum 30 minutes to 1.5 hour commuting on the commuting itself. It's a very productive time of once your life. If you calculate for with respect to 60 years or 70 years of your life, and you are spending that much 1.5 hour every day for the just for the sake of commuting, you see how much of the time productive life has been wasted into this. So that's where walkable economies should be is a new concept, and a 15-minute neighborhoods around the metro stations need to be developed that actually have a lot of positive developments, and transit for long trips have to that is only have to look for the because if you see the during COVID time, the transit has been locked out because of the COVID, and then individual transports have taken priority because of the COVID-19. So, but they made a huge loss. So, how we have to actually look into these aspects? How can we predict the kind of issues, these unforeseen issues? How to manage these things? That is very important today. And energy efficient multimodal transport systems, that is the only key what we can look at, and improving vehicle and fuel technologies. But more importantly, I'm happy to see there is a emerging political will, never before, never like those a decade back or earlier days. We have a political will for the improvement, and as well as there is an urge for towards going sustainable transportation. We only need initiatives and making them viable. That is more important. So that's where the developments are happening. So with these things, let me now just give you a glimpse of what is happening in India. So this is actually I took it from the ITDP report. 31% of today the transport happens by walkable trips in India. But barely, if you all know that today, if you see here the picture, where is the footpath here? We are not even talking about safety of the pedestrian, and many of the road fatalities are happening for the pedestrians. Even recently, you have seen in a case. You must have heard about a case in the Bangalore where a car has come and hit the three pedestrians, and the next big the users are actually the bicycle users. The 17% of the trips are by bicycle. It is happening, but do we really have the bicycle lanes? This is very important. When we did in the initial first phase of the bicycles at Bangalore or some of the cities, they actually do the marking of the bicycle lanes. But just by simple marking by painting, paintbrush, using a paintbrush, we cannot create the bicycle lane. So here we really have to separate them. We really have to upgrade them. That is where I think some improvements I could see in Bangalore when I visited last time. So these are all very important, and making them safe to drive on the bicycle lane is very important. Then only we will be able to encourage this kind of transportation. And the 30% of the trips are happening by buses, but the number of buses what we have today, you have seen the overcrowded buses everywhere, and the congestion on the roads as well as the buses are overcrowded. These are all, and also a lot of intermediate public transport we need to depend on. So this is where we have to invest into increase the bus transport and the better transport, particularly safety and the comfort levels need to be improved a lot, and they need to be compatible with the differently abled people's access as well. And at the same time, if you see here this picture, so only 20% of the trips that are happening by the private sector, private trips, but if you see the two-thirds of the urban space today has been taken over by them for idling parking their vehicles or movement of their vehicles. So this is where we have to relook at that, who should be given the priority, what should be the way we have to plan it out, what are the planning priorities need to be looked at.
Sir,
So,
can you please hurry?
yes, last two slides, that's all. Okay. So here if you see that the 10 commandments, I would like to say here for the transport policy priorities, we need to rebuild mass transit and boost multimodality. And we have to provide a last mile connectivity. Make car use a luxury. If you do these three things together, then we will be able to achieve it and see the impact. If you allow the create as much mass transit, but at the same time freely make the car usage also and making them more cheaper, more subsidy, then we will not be able to achieve the targets that what we set. And go electric with clean energy and promote with incentives and for charging, fast charging infrastructure innovations we have to promote, because this will improve the air quality and reduce the emissions and also lower the noise levels, and promote safe walking and cycling paths, build infrastructure with urban mobility labs, renewable energy, which is very important today for the climate change impact, and leveraging technologies, because today we've been the advancements, unthinkable advancements of the technology. So we have to leverage that to reduce emissions or the way we travel or reduce the trips, unnecessary trips. So this way actually technology helps us in a big way, because we are living in a digital era today. Build transit-oriented development plans for integrating land use and transport planning. This need to be implemented. It's not only making a plan, but this need to be implemented with the complete focus and empowerment. That is very important here. And we need to integrate in an integrated fashion. It has to be done, the governance, and build awareness and promote participatory sustainability is very important. We need to take together all the stakeholders, both at the planning level and as well as at the implementation level. So I already told you, one size, one solution will not help, but global approach, take the best practices of the global, but you have to convert into the localized and customized to your needs. That is where we can really see the faster benefits, and promote sustainable financing options. Although we are living in a comfortable time zones today where finance is not the big issue anymore, because it could be an innovation, it could be a startup, it could be an idea. But what is important is having a well-driven idea, well-thought-out idea, and there are various ways to generate the financing. And value capture is another way of one mechanism, that is where you create a value and where people are willing to share, a willingness to pay for it. So, and integrated empowered governance, which is very, very important. Even our new education, new urban transport policy also talked about UMTA, but if you see that so far we could not implement in a big way. So even of late, I heard that Bangalore has implemented Bangalore Land Transport Authority, but is it an empowered governance structure has been given? Is it really with a participatory leadership when we are taking the priorities we have to look at? So these are all very important. So in conclusion, I just would like to say that there is a three physical policies, that's where we have to focus on, which we have discussed already. And the soft policies, when it comes to the communication, when it comes to the behavioral change, when it comes to the choices, and also of course the knowledge policies. That's where we have to really invest a lot on the R&D area here, where you can establish the coordination with the academia and the industry in a big way. So where we can actually can create much better cities, better streets, and definitely it could be a better lives. And with this, thank you for your attention. Yeah, back to you, Maitri.
Hi. Yes. Thank you so much, sir. Can you hear me? Yes. Yeah. Full presentation. Does anybody have any of the participants have any questions? We'll take it after the other talk is also over. And if the other speaker also has any questions for you, we'll take it after he also speaks. So we will move on. You can talk, and then if you have any questions, you can ask him at the end of your talk. So we'll have a discussion session at the end of it.
Fine, perfect. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Hello.
Yes, sir. Sir, we can't see your face. Yes, now we can see you.
Okay. At the outset, I would like to thank Ms. Maitri for organizing this meeting and for getting me on as one of the speakers. And I'm also very privileged to be a speaker sharing this program along with somebody as highly qualified as Dr. Satya. It's really a privilege, Doctor. Now, my talk will basically be around a book that I've authored titled Climate Change in India, Threats, Challenges and Opportunities, and which is available on Amazon. So I request all of you to get a copy and also popularize it in your various groups. So I think that it's a very important topic, and people ask me as a retired army person, which is the greater threat, China or Pakistan? And I tell them that it is neither China nor Pakistan. The greatest threat to our country and to entire region is climate change. With that, I request Maitri, if you can kindly share my screen.
Yeah, sir, you'll be able to share it. Yeah.
Okay. No.
Just click the share screen button at the bottom, the green button.
The green button.
Right in the middle.
Um,
Or you can send me your presentation and I'll share.
Share screen, yeah.
Either way.
I got it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Are we good?
Yeah. We're good. You can open your presentation.
Yeah, one sec.
Yeah.
Right.
Sir, press F5. Yeah.
Is it okay?
Yes, we can see it. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it's okay.
So this is the title of my book, Climate Change in India, Threats, Challenges and Opportunities. And this is a cover page. And on the cover page itself, it is the cyclone Taukte battering the gateway of India on 17 November 2021. So climate change, ladies and gentlemen, is a reality, as you all know, and it is at our doorstep. Now, in these photographs on the top left, these are the landslides due to excessive rainfall and extreme weather event of landslides and flooding that occurred in my own district in the Western Ghat area of Kodagu in 2018. Below you have a scene of flooding in Chennai city. Here you have the great glacial lake outburst flood that occurred in Uttarakhand recently. This here is a parched landscape drought in Madhya Pradesh, and down below also very recently forest fires in Uttarakhand. All this driven by climate change. So this is a very serious threat that is already upon us. Now, what are the consequences of climate change in India? The point here is that whether climate change is minimal at 1.5 degrees or it may go even beyond 2.5 or 3, some amount of climate change is inevitable. And the consequences, even due to a minimal rise of 1.5 degrees in the next 2 decades or so, will result in millions of people being displaced due to sea level rise in India, maybe 7 million. And Lakshadweep Islands will be totally submerged. Andaman and Nicobar Islands will become uninhabitable both due to sea level rise and to extreme weather events. And there will be massive loss of ice and snow cover in the Himalayas. So what is the way forward? The mega tourism projects in the Lakshadweep and Andaman Islands at a cost of several thousands of crores will have to be shelved. The Sagar Mala project will have to be reviewed, and the National Maritime Foundation has already cautioned the government against going full steam ahead with the Sagar Mala project because the sea level rise and extreme weather events like cyclones is going to cause serious damage to the Sagar Mala project in its present form. Also, the cost of the Sagar Mala project is pegged at about 15 lakh crores as of now. Then we have the river interlinking project, which also needs to be reviewed. That at the present cost would be around 10 lakh crores. And it envisages the linking of 30 river interlinking projects, 14 in the Himalayas and 16 in peninsula, across the peninsula rivers. And this also needs to be reviewed for the reason that we'll deal mainly with the Himalayan rivers. Now the concept is to divert the flooded rivers of the east, in the northeast, from the eastern Himalayas towards the more dry rivers to the western region of India. This looks good as a concept. On one side, you're dealing with the floods, and other side, you're coping with the drought. But the fact of the matter is that the glaciers causing these floods are melting at a very rapid rate, and most of them are, especially eastern Himalayas, are going to lose about 75% of the mass in the next coming decades, maybe 25 to 30 years from now. So once that happens, all those thousands of dams, total number of dams across India will be 3,000, and thousands of kilometers of canals. These will be absolutely dry when you need the water. So this will be a massive waste of money, and would have cut off movement corridors of wildlife, and also several villages and people will be displaced. So the massive funding for the above projects of Sagarmala, river interlinking, and the mega tourism projects should be diverted and utilized for relocating the displaced populations and for investment for mitigation of climate change. So what we have suggested is a four-pronged strategy. One, cutting down on India's dependence on coal and transiting rapidly towards renewable energy. Two, preparing for sea level rise. Three, zoning of the Indian landscape to prepare for climate change. And four, stabilization of climate change in the Himalayas and the Mekong Basin through regional cooperation. When we come to zoning of the Indian landscape for climate change, regarding cutting down on India's dependence on coal, my book, I have an article contributed by Mr. Shankar Sharma, who's a power policy expert and consultant, and he's contributed a very excellent article on this subject. Preparing for sea level rise. Now, the point here is that when you have got by 2030, two things are going to happen. One, millions of people, maybe close to 1 crore, will be displaced due to sea level rise from the coastal areas of India. And two, the population of the country would have peaked from 1.3 or 1.4 billion to about 1.6 or 1.7 billion. So this increase in, and three, climate refugees from neighboring countries, especially Bangladesh and perhaps Myanmar, will come to India in large numbers. So we have to cater for this large number of population entering the country, cater for their housing, cater for their other resources, cater for their jobs, and so on and so forth. And as regards climate refugees from neighboring countries, what I have mentioned in the book is that our future climate negotiations should not be only about cutting down on emissions. We should also talk about which country should take what share of refugees. India cannot afford to take, with its even present population pressures, we cannot afford to be taking climate refugees of all who have to come. So other countries also must take their share. That is important. Next, zoning of the Indian landscape to prepare for climate change. We have to zone the country as to which are the catchment areas, which are the crop growing areas, which are the industrial hubs, which are the population centers, which are the infrastructural corridors. And we have to plan the landscape that will have been reduced by about 2020-25. We cannot keep on, piling up, and our mega cities are already imploding, and that has been very clearly brought out during the migrant crisis of the COVID about a year back, the tragedy of the migrants going back to their villages. So the Indian landscape, we cannot keep on making the mega cities even bigger. We have to look at different regions to manage the population. Population scenario, as I had mentioned earlier. Then coming on to the stabilization of climate change in the Himalayas and the Mekong Basin through regional cooperation. I'll be touching upon this subsequently in another slide. Now, there is an urgent need to move away from fossil fuels, rapid transition to renewable energy, including rooftop solar, urgent transition to smart grid systems for distribution of electricity, and increased investment towards green hydrogen, which is green hydrogen that is produced without using fossil fuels and so on, which is through green technologies. Now, preparing for sea level rise, Niti Aayog to make a thorough analysis of sea level rise and the quantum of population that will be displaced, including refugees from neighboring countries. India must initiate negotiations with other nations to come to an agreement on the share of climate refugees to be taken in by respective countries. Sagarmala and mega tourism projects for Lakshadweep and Andaman and Nicobar Islands to be reviewed. Coming on to zoning of the Indian landscape to prepare for climate change. We must zone the country to catchment areas. You can also call them water producing zones for easier understanding by the policymakers. To population centers, industrial hubs, and communication corridors for the projected population by say 2050. It's to be noted that the zoning process has to cater for the projected peak in the population of India by 2050 and should include the people displaced by sea level rise, including climate refugees. Now, this is a very important subject, catchment area policy. For the sake of water security in the backdrop of climate change, there is a need for the Ministry of Water Resources to frame a catchment area policy with focus on the Himalayas and the Western Ghats. The recommendations of the Western Ghats expert panel, the Madhav Gill report, and the high-level working group report, that is the Kasturangan report recommendations, they need to be reviewed. And they need to be revisited, not only reviewed, they need to be revisited and reviewed. And to be very frank, the Madhav Gadgil report was an excellent report, while the Kasturirangan report was highly watered down. I would say that the Madhav Gadgil report should be taken, but there are certain recommendations of Madhav Gadgil report which are a little bit draconian, and they have to be slightly softened down, and perhaps that would be an excellent catchment area policy for the Western Ghats. And this similar policy of, like as mentioned by Madhav Gadgil, should be applied in the Himalayas also, because that is the other very important catchment area. Then thirdly, the concept of payment for ecological services should be introduced as an incentive. The College of Forestry, Pannampet in Kodagu has prepared a document on payment for ecological services for Kodagu, which can be taken as a pilot project. And I am hopeful that the Indian Institute of Sciences will help us to take this idea forward. So as I said, the College of Forestry has prepared a document on the possibilities of payment for ecological services in Kodagu, the Western Ghats. The concept of PES could be introduced in Kodagu as a pilot project and then taken to other catchment areas in the Western Ghats and the Himalayas. Or we could have a concurrent pilot project, one in Kodagu and one possibly somewhere in the Himalayas. We are already doing some work in Chamoli district, so it could be taken, perhaps one project could be taken there, one in the Himalayas and one in the Western Ghats. Now, coming to stabilization of climate change in the Himalayas and the Mekong region. The proposed HIMEC Alliance, we call it the HIMEC Alliance. The proposed HIMEC Alliance envisages a two-pronged strategy for mitigation of climate change in the Himalayas and the Mekong Basin, to include drastic reduction in black carbon emissions coupled with large-scale forest land restoration. Why the Mekong region has been taken is because the Mekong River also flows from the eastern Himalayas, and it is contiguous to the Himalayan region. So they are interdependent on as far as climate change is concerned. Now, on the left, you see the receding glaciers and reduced snowfall. It is a matter of deep concern to the entire global community that the ecosystems of the Himalayas are under serious threat due to the effects of global warming and climate change. When you come to the Mekong Basin, the Mekong Basin, the Mekong Basin is an important ecoregion with rich biodiversity that is spread across 6 countries of China, Myanmar, Laos DPR, Vietnam, Thailand, and Cambodia. It is inhabited by 65 million people and provides the staple diet of rice to 300 million people. The Mekong Basin faces serious threats from climate change. The lower Mekong is especially vulnerable to increased flooding, water salinization, and more severe droughts. Now, we have already made some progress on the HIMEC Alliance. 3 things have happened. Firstly, we have signed a memorandum of understanding between the Indian IUCN Asian Regional Office and the Asian Institute of Technology. So these 2 institutions have signed an MOU on the basis of the HIMEC Alliance. This is just the first page of the MOU. The second is that we have some funding from a donor in the US, Ms. Malika Sankaran. And with that funding, we have set up a HIMEC cell at IUCN India office. So that is the second. The third is that there is my colleague, Mr. Vipul Sharma, who was originally in IUCN. Now he is working as a consultant in the Environment Research Foundation. So one of the sources of black carbon that are impacting climate change in the Himalayas is the domestic cook stoves, the millions of stoves. So recently, the good news is that Mr. Vipul Sharma has got a sponsorship for 5,000 smokeless Bosch stoves to be distributed in Chamoli district, and the process is on. So we have already taken the first few steps and hope we go forward and sensitize the policymakers of all the 11 countries to come forward and for stabilization of climate change in the Himalayas and the Mekong region. Some other important aspects covered in my book: improvement of wildlife habitat and forest management. I've written a paper on improved habitat management in the Nilgiris Biosphere Reserve and the adjoining elephant reserves of South India. That is the Mysore Elephant Reserve, Wayanad Elephant Reserve, and the Nilgiris Elephant Reserve, which is about 12,000 square kilometers and having a elephant population of about 11,000, and which is causing serious human-animal conflict, and that is basically because of destruction of habitat. And why we need to maintain this habitat is because it is one of our major the buffers against climate change. The second is permafrost melt. As the climate change drives the temperatures higher, the permafrost, that is the just beneath the ice cover, the cold earth is there, so that starts melting, and the more of the greenhouse gases are released, and that sets off a vicious cycle of climate change. The more the climate change, the more the permafrost melt, the more the permafrost melt, the greater is the climate change. So that is something that needs to be addressed on priority. Then this would be of interest to Dr. Satya. There is, I have a friend, Dr. Suminder Singh, is a innovator, a technologist, and he has his agency, Garuda Technologies. They have made a small modification to the engine of both diesel and petrol, by which the fuel consumption is greatly reduced. Fuel efficiency increases by up to 35 to 40%, and the emissions are also very much brought down. I will be contacting Dr. Satya on this in more detail, so that we can take up this, and the government and other vehicle manufacturing companies are also take up this technology. Lastly, Dr. Samir, working for Green Tech Solutions in Delhi, has been very kind. He has also contributed an article. I think that is also included in my book. And because the brick kilns, they're a huge emitter of CO2 and black carbon, which are driving climate change. So our attempt in the Himach Alliance, the brick technologies also, because we want to get the cleaner brick technologies on priority in the areas inside and around the Himalayas, so that we reduce the emissions of black carbon. So that is it, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you found my talk somewhat interesting, and do get a copy of my book. And thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Muthanna. Dr. Satya, do you have any questions for him, or do you have any questions? Do you want to do a discussion of whatever?
No, first of all, for Colonel, I should thank him for such a wonderful presentation and his effort, and also his offer of connecting me to green technologies. Surely it is welcoming step, sir, and I'm also I'm about to say a similar thing for you also. At Srinivasa University in Bangalore, we are going to start a smart and sustainable sustainability center, which is doing a lot of research in this area. So
Right.
I will also invite you during the launch, as well as you will be part of our executive council as well, because we are just staying close by, so we can
Your neighbors.
contribute a lot.
Sure.
Because already Dakshin Kannada and as well as the Kodagu region Town Planners Association already in touch with us, so
Right,
to
right.
do improvements in this area. So we can do collaboratively a lot of activities in this area. It's wonderful actually to connect with you. So thank you very much. So anything else you have expectations, Maitri?
Doctor, that is very interesting regarding this urban, because this urban planning, it is a serious problem for Kodagu, because Kodagu is getting very fast urbanized, and we
Yes.
cannot have the catchment of Kaveri becoming, there is things keep going like this. We'll have one huge city the size of Mysore in South Kodagu and a similar one in North Kodagu. And then we can no longer be catchment for Kaveri River,
Yes.
Principal catchment. So I'm even in court on the subject. We have got some sort of a stay. But I'll be very happy to share our views and what efforts we are doing in that direction.
And also your interesting of Sagarmala coastal reservoirs, these are also very upcoming initiatives actually. So that also will be of great help from
Right.
you. We can look at. Yeah.
We're very happy to cooperate. Thank you.
Maitreyi, back to you.
Yes, thank you so much for participating in this keynote. I will be in touch with both of you for the future workshop that Future Earth will be conducting in August. So I will be contacting you in a couple of weeks with all the agenda and how it will be done. So
Sure.
hoping to see both of you in person for the workshop.
Yeah,
Yes.
sure.
Yeah,
So,
and also for
yeah,
sustainable transportation, you please look at the agencies as well as the areas where we can say one big city like a metropolitan city. At the same time, we should see the smaller areas as well as one village. So rural transport as well as with the small cities, small sized cities, and a metropolitan. That should be the focus. That is where you can really can build right amount of solution and the knowledge there repository. So that is what Future Earth is mandated also. So that helps a lot when we select in that way. Yeah.
yes. Yes,
Right.
yes, of course, of course. Yes. I'll be putting you all in touch with the other speakers that we had for the webinar series as well, so that it's a more coherent and cohesive collaboration which goes forward. Yes.
Excellent.
Thank you so much, both of you, for taking your time out and
Yeah.
participating. And
Thank you.
thank you, all the participants, for joining in so early in the morning. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.